So one of the topics we want to get into this morning was actually a topic that we weren't able to get into yesterday, and that is, of course, the comments by one pundit with regards to what demographic group he thought was the cause of the crime terrorizing Aranguez. And he made a claim basically saying that urban youths were responsible for crime against East Indians, urban youths from the East-West corridor. Now, that claim has gone on to now garner heavy disagreement from different sectors of society, including, I believe, both Michael Pear as well as Collis Hazel. I think those were the two senior officers that spoke out against it, saying, well, look, we don't have any evidence saying that the crimes are targeted. And in their estimation, it's just about crimes of opportunity, soft targets, if there's a perception that by criminals that, look, I could get away, or it's an easy mark, or it's relatively safe for me to try to rob from you, attack you, invade your home, whatever, then they will come after you. And it's not based on any sort of racial scenario, which I actually would, to some extent, agree with for the most, almost completely, actually. I don't necessarily subscribe to the fact that crime is racially targeted. Somebody else who spoke out against it was, oh gosh, I don't want to get his name wrong.
Well, there were quite a few people that spoke out against it, actually. But while you're actually looking for that particular detail, just to clarify, it wasn't one pundit. It was actually a group of 5 pundits, and there were two that spoke out and had similar messaging. One was Dr. Ramachan, Pundit Dr. Ramachan, and then you had Dr. Satyanan Maraj, who I had the opportunity to speak to earlier this morning on AM Prime. And before I get into that, let's just have an understanding that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, in its part, will always try to downplay certain things, right? So we have an understanding and we recognize that. That's not the issue here, but in the context that you've raised it, let's just say that many a times they don't necessarily give detailed information, they just try to downplay things. Yes. So get that out of the way. I think he gave clarification this morning. He said that the exact term that he used was urban youth gang member. And he says that the media reporting took it out of context. For me, I think even if you're using the term urban youth gang member, you then went on to say that East Indians are the targets in Aranguez, because Aranguez is a predominantly East Indian community. I'm always actually very split between whether we should say Afro-Trinidadian or Indo-Trinidadian, whether or not we should just stick to the term Trinbagonian, right? I'm always split about that. I've always said that before. But I also believe that his comments and the pundit's comments, though he was saying that it was urban youth gang members, the mere fact that you've already said East Indians are under attack or under siege, we can already put a meaning to what he was alluding to. Though those words did not come out of his mouth, one can interpret it a certain way because of what he continued to suggest. Furthermore, in my opinion, though he gave some clarification, I also believe, in my opinion, following this conversation, that the comments were ill-timed. There was no need for such comments at this point. He's suggesting that how, we shouldn't shy away from this. When do you want us to make comments? There are issues here in Trinidad and Tobago which we tend to ignore. And I'm a firm believer that there are race relation issues that we tend to ignore. But again, the comments were divisive. It is, you need more comments of unity in these times. You can argue, and there are people out there who I've seen the commentary on social media, I've seen the commentary in newspaper articles where people are supporting the pundit's comments. My thing is, he should have spoken of Aranguez on a whole. If you want to make, because at the end of the day, if we're being honest with each other, he is a pundit. These are 5 pundits, predominantly East Indians or Indo-Trinidadians or Trinbagonians.
I don't hear about many non-Indo-Trinidadians that are
associate with the Hindu faith, right? And the mere fact you went on to say East Indian, you've also kind of split the community of Aranguez to a certain degree. In my opinion, you should have spoken about Aranguez as a whole. Or you should have spoken about Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. And even though you're defending the comments and you're saying it's taken out of context and people want to see race where racism doesn't exist, I think the moment that you put the terms East Indians in your context and then urban youth gang members, and you came up with all this commentary, ill-timed, unnecessary, and I could understand why people are interpreting it as racial.
The thing is, again, yes, you are very correct. Once you say attacking East Indians, that means you are defining an us. So then it is almost unreasonable to expect people to not interpret your words as East Indians are the us, urban youths are the them, and if one group is being defined by race, then the other group, which is using a term that normally refers to one race, most likely is defined by race. So now, I will always say don't attribute to malice what could be attributed to incompetence. If the pundit basically came out and said he made a mistake with his phrasing. But you're right, the key point is the fact that he identified an us based on race, not based on area or based on some other type of demographic that would not just, pinpoint or lead us straight down that direction. So if it's unintentional, this is, again, when you're speaking to the public, you have to be very careful. However, I have a hard time believing that to some extent it was not intentional. And maybe it's not that it's a racial statement, maybe it's just an insensitive statement. There's a fine line between the two.
Precisely.
But it's still, an insensitive statement is still not that great. It's not that much better, really.
That is why I needed some level of clarification for urban youth gang member, because is it that, and he was very careful, and he's also suggesting that people want me to pin the tail on the donkey. Those were his words. I think for me is it that we are now associating a certain race or a certain skin color to an urban youth gang member? Because even if East Indians are under siege, not all crime is reported. There are crimes that are reported in the newspaper, and the description of the perpetrators are that of Afro-Trinidadians, right? And that's the argument that he's making. But the thing is that you also cannot actually be blinded by the factor, I'm not saying fact, I'm saying the factor that because I don't have statistics and he didn't have statistics, and I don't think the TTBS has statistics. So I can't say it's a fact, but you cannot underscore that there may be East Indians who are involved in these gangs, and I'm pretty sure that they are, and East Indians who are maybe are not pulling the trigger, but maybe are the ones that are in the background calling, certain things or dealing with certain things. You cannot underscore that as well. So to me, even though you are making the argument that if you take a look at the headlines and these are what's happening, great, okay, in those particular instances, yeah, but when you have another family member, when Indo-Trinidadians are always fighting over land disputes or something like that, we don't speak out about that often enough. When Indo-Trinidadians are involved in crimes, we don't speak out of that. And if you want to turn this into a racial issue, again, he's saying, I'm not trying to turn it into a racial issue, but I'm trying to raise the conversation that it's something that we've ignored. Again, as a man of the cloth and somebody who sees yourself as a leader, you have to be absolutely careful with your communication.
We are too influenced by other parts of the world, by foreign media, particularly America. And one of the things that happens, not necessarily in the same way, is correlation being confused with causation. Because, yes, to some degree, one could make a reasonable case that, look, most urban gang members of African descent, whether it's in TNT or in the States, right? Now, does that mean that there's something criminal about the race? No, you can't make that statement. There's a whole host of complicated factors that lead to that scenario playing out, right? But the flip, and it goes on further. You see it in America where they want to utilize crime statistics and make correlations with regards to race relations and say, well, this is the cause of racism, and look at this and look at this and look at this. But crime is more complex than that. And I honestly believe that for the most part, a lot of what you see with regards to crime and race, it's generally the racial factor is more than of a coincidence, in my opinion, than say the socioeconomic factors or just cultural factors with regards to not racial cultural factors, but a specific location, like compared to another, and how they treat with certain things. It's not about the race that lives in an area, but like this specific area, whether it is white, black, mixed, whatever, has a certain type of mindset. And then how is that translated? And on top of that, we also have the causation of, well, just because you're from a hotspot doesn't mean that you're engaged in crime. That stereotype doesn't really work. You can't generalize everybody. It's really a minority. So all of these things with regards to analyzing has to be very careful. But the problem is, and this is where the influence is an issue, we see it online, on TV a lot, where they just make those quick, easy, low-hanging fruit judgments. Oh, well, because this statistic, that means that we have this problem or that problem, whatever. Whereas I say, no. Why is it that the crimes are being committed? I think the TTPS at least has identified one relevant factor, and the fact of the matter is the pundits need to understand that, look, if there's a crime situation in Aranguez, it's because Aranguez is a tempting target. And it just so happens, as you said, there's a majority population there of one race. So you're going to get most of the victims of the crime being of that race.
I also, I always like to be fair. And in being fair to the pundit, he also raised the issue of the education system. He's also raised the issue generally of the social factors within society and the family setting. So he did make some good points. The unfortunate thing is it's overshadowed by everything else.
Those points matter. But then now if you try to correlate it too much with, okay, well, this race does well in academics and that race does not do well in academics, to some extent.
Which he didn't do in this particular interview, but there are instances before which one could say he has alluded to it.
People, you see, where it gets bad is when you take it a step further. Because of that, they're jealous of us and all of that nonsense. Yeah, then we go in a bridge too far, or maybe more than a bridge too far.
Well,
but
he hasn't gone to that extent.
Well, hopefully it doesn't get there, but I'm sure that they have people who comment, the rum shop commentary, somebody somewhere will make those comments.
And somebody's already going to interpret what you're saying. You see rum shop
True,
commentary.
okay.
No. I'm not saying you're wrong in what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying how we are as a society now.
It's the term.
It's just the terminology, what is associated with.
We don't have any other bar term.
And this thing about, you see this, you saying that, and somebody will go and say, it's a dog whistle, Sean. But I think that is where we'll conclude. I think later on, ladies and gentlemen, when we open up the phone line, you can share with us your thoughts as to the comments made by these pundits over the situation in Aranguez. Some people are already upset that it is getting the media attention and it is not necessary. I think in instances like this, it is absolutely necessary because it's an opportunity for us to try and stamp out this issue here in TNT where this division lies. We need to try and stamp that out.
Here's the thing. I understand why people say that. Because racism will always exist as long as it is a topic. As long as the divisions is a topic, there will always be racism. But like you said, the key point is we can't just ignore it. Because it will grow. Those of us who don't want to speak about it, it will grow on its own. And
that's the argument that the pundit is making. That's the argument that he's making. No, if you get the opportunity, watch the AM Prime Minister, you have to understand, I am not defending these comments.
Yeah.
I have been against these comments. I think all the communication could have been better.
I think most times it is poor communication and insensitivity. I honestly think that.